Hi, I'm Jonathan Campos with Fight Kitchen Fires Limited, and today I'm going to talk to you about the cost of a fire. Now, specifically, here's the overview. So we can't start a briefing or a class without, of course, introducing one's self. So this is me. Once again, Jonathan Campos. I've been an Air Force firefighter for 19 years. I currently hold a commission with the state of Texas as a master fire inspector and a master structure firefighter, amongst other certifications. As far as education, most recently I finished my graduate certificate in sales leadership and business development. So I learned about the numbers. I figured this is exactly what we need to know in order for us to understand, again, the monetary value, the cost of these fires. So as a firefighter, I saw it, but now as a business owner, and more so a graduate and a candidate for an MBA for fall of 2024, of course, I'm applying all of that to business and hopefully here to your business. So as we know, there's a staffing shortage, and with the staffing shortage, there's a high turnover rate. These are some of the reasons why there's a high turnover. Whether or not you know it, I've done the research for you here. Here it is. However, with high turnover, that also means that we have a lot of fresh minds, a lot of fresh employees that may not necessarily know how to use, let's say, extinguishers or how to sound the alarm that something's happening, because there's a shortage of staff, so you're pretty quick at putting them into work. Your personnel that have been there for a while, they perhaps are too busy picking up the slack or even figuring out how to do the rest of the work during the learning curve of the new employees. And so they themselves may not have time to also do the training that's required every year or every month, depending on what it is that you're talking about. Here is a video. It takes place, of course, in a commercial kitchen, and these two workers are about to see what a spontaneous combustion of grease looks like. On the right side, you see that the flame just appeared, and the first person sees it and just freezes. They look at it, they don't know what to do, perhaps wondering how it happened, and it's their partner in the back, still fixing food, turns around and stops in their track. Now this fire is growing, and as you can see, it's just flaring up, and the first person just raises her hand into the air. They don't know what to do. It's getting hot, so they took a step back. That radiant heat is getting to them. So the first person walks away, the other one puts their hands on their face. Maybe they're looking for something, calling for someone. Either way, here comes the first person. You saw a flare up there. The first person knows water fights fire. In this case, it's a grease fire, and that was not the right thing to do. Now, this happens for many reasons. First off, the grease was going to spontaneously combust because it got to its temperature its ignition temperature where it automatically combusted. So, okay, that was going to happen. How that fire would have been treated would have, of course, led to the outcome, whether it was positive or negative, but that in itself was its own condition. An accident had happened. Something happened and there was a fire. The secondary effect here was that the employee used water to fight a grease fire. As you know, water expands, and it expands 1,700 times its own size. So basically, when that water was poured into this grease that's very hot, water convert it from its liquid state into its gas state and expand it 1,700 times. As it did that, of course, it had to replace the oil. It was replacing the oil and pushed all that oil up, and that's what we see here with this explosion. So in this case, although accidents happen, the wrong intervention can make it worse. The first flare-up could have been a different outcome had it just nothing been done. But the fact that an action was taken and it was the wrong action, that's how we have this. And that's the importance of training and training your personnel on not just your fire extinguishers, but also the classifications of fires as well as the fire extinguishing system on your vent hood. Okay, so let's go over the different stages of fire. There are 4 different stages. We're only going to go through the first 3, but the 4 are incipient stage, growth stage, fully developed, and then decay. Decay just means it was extinguished, it's out, it's no longer a thing. Okay, the incipient stage. This is the beginning. Exactly this image. This is the easiest fire to fight, the easiest fire to extinguish. Some of the methods to extinguish this fire include using a metal lid to cover up that area and suffocate the fire. Basically, you've removed the oxygen, the fire consumable was left over in that space that you covered with the metal lid, and because there was no more oxygen, it just put itself out. You could also use a fire extinguisher here. Because it's still small, you could get away with using your Class K fire extinguisher. Of course, knowing what that is and where it is also matters. And you can use the kitchen suppression system, totally up to you, but if it's contained, I would personally just cover it up if I could and have it suffocate. So in terms of monetary costs, here we definitely are going to have to replace that grease. It was probably going to need to be replaced anyway, so we're talking about what, $50? Then your fire extinguisher. If you decide to use a fire extinguisher because let's say the lid didn't work, then you're looking at about $70 to $100 to either replace it or get it recharged. It's going to take about an hour cleanup. And again, it just depends on your crew, depends what happened, but let's say about an hour. Usually, and this depends per jurisdiction, but usually you can resume operations if the fire was small and it was contained. So something like this, chances are you could probably resume operations given that your extinguishing system, let's say you use the fire extinguisher, given that it didn't get everywhere and there's no contamination of food, it's only located in that fryer, then that fryer is now out of service. Of course, you need to clean it up, but chances are, again, you could probably more than likely resume operations. Make sure you verify that with your health department, your fire marshals or fire department, just to make sure, because again, every place is different. I'm not telling you that you can, I'm saying that it's a possibility that you could, but find out for sure. From the incipient phase, we go into the growth stage. Here, this is your last chance to fight this fire before you need professional help, meaning the firefighters. Here, start considering evacuation. If you're going to fight it, commit to it, and if it doesn't work, then get out. The methods are basically the same, we just add another one. So here, you could still try and cover it with a lid. You could still use a fire extinguisher, and of course, you can use the kitchen suppression system. Here in this image, on the top right, we see a red bottle. That is the extinguishing system for the hood that's right next to it that sits right above the fryer. So if this system doesn't go off, let's suppose it's properly cleaned, but it doesn't go off. Well, it can still be manually activated. If your staff is not trained on how to manually activate it, then that system is really just a decoration. You need to train your staff. Everybody needs to know how to use it. It's typically, the little pull station is typically on the way out, next to the door on the way out. But little silver round thing, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to grab it, twist it, and pull. You're supposed to pull it until it clicks. Typically, it clicks when it stops. So that's when the system activates. And it's on the way out because that way you could pull it as you're running out. If, however, everyone evacuates, they run away, they don't pull it, and this fire keeps going, then hopefully it melts the fusible links that are inside the hood, which will then activate the system. One reason why, there's many, but one reason why this would not activate is if the hood is not being cleaned properly, in accordance with the standard, then grease can be around both the nozzles inside the hood that spray this extinguishing agent and around the fusible links that are supposed to melt whenever a flame basically reaches it and heats it up to the rated temperature. So if there's grease around the fusible link that's supposed to melt, then the grease will first burn, and however long that takes to burn off, that time will pass, and then eventually that fusible link will melt, and maybe the extinguishing system works as designed, because if there's that much grease, then there's probably grease inside your piping as well. Let's talk money. On the left, we see those costs. Again, replace the grease, replace the extinguisher. Now you're going to need your kitchen suppression system recharged. It's going to take about 3 to 8 hours, depending how much of it discharged, where it discharged. Maybe, it's sprayed up against the opposite wall. Chances are you're going to have to be closed for the day. Reason for this is because the cleanup. Not just that, you're going to have to clean up and dispose of all that food. It looks like they were making burgers on the left side. All of that, if you activate your system, will have to be thrown out. I'm not telling you that so you don't activate it. Activating it is the right thing to do. What I'm saying is this is going to affect you if it's not stopped here. It's going to affect you even more. The next stage, you'll see how this actually costs even more money than where we are currently. Here and the next stage, you will require an inspection by the health department and the fire marshal, so the fire department, depending on what happened. But either way, they're going to have to come out and take a look, and only once you pass that inspection will they allow you to open back up. The approximate total are all the figures on the left, the monetary value there, plus the cleaning time, plus, of course, the profit that you lost, and of course, now you have hourless workers. You probably sent workers home because there's no work for them unless it's the cleaning crew. And if it's all of them cleaning, then, that's still money lost. So how much is your crew? How much does having your crew around for, let's just say, 4 hours, how much does that cost the business? Think about that as you think about the training, the importance of your staff knowing what to do. And as we go into the fully developed stage, I want to point out that this is a later stage in the fire. Here's where you evacuate. Here you call 911, you get out, you make sure that you take your customers with you, you make sure that your employees activate the emergency action plan. Remember, as a business owner, more so as an actual brick and mortar place, you have a duty of responsibility to your customers. You have to protect them. That is an actual thing. And if you don't know how to, if you don't have a plan in place, or if your employees don't know how to activate it so that they could care for your customers, then you're going to have more issues beyond just this fire and the loss of food. Your customers are also your responsibility, and the plan, the emergency action plan needs to exist in order for your customers and your employees to be taken care of, and everybody know what to do and know where to go and who's in charge of what. So if this fire, this fully developed fire, just stays in the kitchen, let's suppose it was contained in the kitchen, it doesn't spread anywhere else. We're looking at these figures here on the left. Of course, now your fryers, the firefighters are going to come in and they're going to inspect. They're probably going to make holes on the wall, check your vents, just to make sure there's no fire extension, meaning the fire hasn't expanded and burned other things, and the whole fire has been put out. So you're also going to have this fire debris, and you're going to have to clean it up or get it cleaned up by specialists like the fire and flood specialists that are out there. And for what I know, that's not a cheap service. Of course, your food replacement. Did you know that if plastic is, let's say your Pepsi bottles or whatever bottle, it doesn't matter, just a plastic bottle, is exposed to heat and smoke, and of course flames, that needs to be replaced. Did you know that? That's going to cost you money as well. So not just the food that had all the fire debris and the fire extinguishing system residue on it, not just the food, you're also talking your drinks. Those are going to have to be replaced as well. Fire suppression system recharge, of course, we talked about that. If you need to remodel your kitchen or your building, again, right now we're talking about if the fire was only contained in the kitchen. So if your ceiling or your walls, perhaps your appliances, if any of that needs to be replaced, that's that cost. Of course, you're going to have to spend time with your insurance. They're going to investigate. You're probably going to put in a claim, and you can be closed for days, if not years. And that's a fact that we also don't think about, because this fire could have been small, but this small fire could still put us out for a long time. And of course, you'll have to be inspected again by the health department, fire department. If this fire affected the stability of the building, of course, now you're talking engineers and the inspection of the integrity of the rest of the building. Of course, secondary and tertiary effects we don't really think about, but these are the ones that also affect you. So your employees don't have income. We talked about high turnover and staffing shortage. You don't want your employees out of work because they're going to go look for work. They have bills to pay. You don't want that. Of course, if the community is affected, you could get negative rapport there. Of course, your insurance deductible. The list goes on. The point here is, by knowing what to do and how to do it, you can avoid or at least minimize a lot of these things. That bottom bullet on the right side, struggle to figure out salvaging food. That is a problem that even exists outside of fires. Suppose your electricity goes out and your fridge, of course, is no longer cooling your food. Do you have a plan of action? Where are you going to take your food? How are you going to keep it chilled? That's something that we really don't think about. But if you had an emergency action plan that covered emergencies and fires and things like this, then not only would you know exactly what to do, but so would your staff. That way, they're not dependent on you. You're not the one that has to do everything. And more so, your staff is trained to know where to look, at a minimum, where to look in case they did forget their training. Okay, let's talk numbers. When it comes down to my research and what I found in terms of average restaurant profit and what they make on the weekends, I found that 54% of the profit margin on average is made on the weekend between Friday and Sunday. So basically throughout the US, on average, the weekly average profit margin is earned Friday through Sunday. Looking at the most recent data, which is actually from 2010-2014, released in 2017, this is the most current data, it was found that 45% of fires happened during Friday through Sunday. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's about right. I mean, it's average. The thing is, it's only slightly above average, and this is the highest. So there's more of a chance that a fire happens between Friday and Sunday than all the other days. And that, when you look at the 54% on average profit margin that's being made, you can kind of see how 45% can really affect over half of your profit margin. That's something to consider when you're thinking about training or emergency action plans, because without that plan or without that training, 54% of your profit margin is affected. Let's take a look at this eating and drinking establishments. So here the fires, we're going to continue with 2010 to 2014. Here we see peaks and valleys. We see that in March there's more fires there. and then there's less in September. Of course, this is also seasonal. You could consider that there's a lot going on at different times of the year. But one thing to consider is that all that blue from 0 on up, that's a number of fire that has happened between 2010 and 2014. So in March, for example, we're looking at about 700 fires that happened. The fires will happen. We could see here that the fires have happened. The question is your staff fully trained and prepared to act properly and to react the way that they should because of the training that they've had? So here I want to show that the fires have been recorded and they have happened. Now, we're not talking what outcome happened here. I can't tell you every single outcome for these fires, but I want to point out that they are happening. Is your staff ready? Interestingly enough, fires at night are more expensive, even though they're less frequent. So here we could see in the early hours, this is a 24-hour clock that I did there at the bottom, but we could see between the hours of 2:30 until about 4:30, the property damage is significant, more so than almost double, more than double than at nighttime around closing time. One must wonder why. Now, we're not here to answer that question, but this is where it matters with maintenance. If your vent hood, for example, is not cleaned properly, I mentioned earlier, the fusible link might be clogged up, might be sealed because of that grease, and therefore the fusible link can't melt and can't activate the system. Perhaps the nozzles inside the ductwork are clogged as well, and therefore they cannot extinguish the fire because they can't discharge the extinguishing agent. Perhaps even the alarm system isn't working or the detectors. This is where maintenance really matters. This is where not paying or not using a certified vent hood cleaner will affect you. This is where not having your alarm system maintained often will affect you. The fires are less frequent. However, they are more expensive at nighttime, as you could see. Okay, let's move on. When it comes to solutions, here are 5 solutions that could help mitigate a fire and your monetary loss. To begin with, of course, fire extinguisher training. But I'm not just talking about learning how to use the extinguisher. That is important. However, specifically, you and your staff need to know the different classifications of fire and the different classes of extinguishers. For example, if you use the wrong extinguisher on a grease fire, it would literally be the same thing we just saw on the video, because the Class A extinguisher, which is only Class A, is water. So if you don't know that your Class A extinguisher is water, and you don't know that your cooking fat grease is a Class K, then you're bound, or someone is bound, to commit that mistake and repeat that video that we just saw. That takes us into trained personnel. It's very important to train our personnel for that reason. A lot of people mean to do good, and they have really good intentions, and that's great. One way to make sure that their intentions actually end up being successful and appropriate is by training them and making sure that there's also ongoing and refresher training as well. With the training comes emergency action plans. Emergency action plans should be made by local management. Basically, there's a whole method to it, but basically you could take different people from different sections to come up with a plan for some of the most common or more than likely emergencies that can happen. You write up the plan, you then agree on it, and ultimately you post it and make it accessible for all personnel, and you train them on it so they know how to react. Think about earthquakes, fires, floods, anything like that. emergency action plan. How do you evacuate your customers? How do you protect your food? How do you shut off the electricity? Again, having these plans and training on them helps save time, which can also help mitigate the situation or the emergency. Next, internal monthly inspections. Did you know that your fire extinguishers need to be visually inspected every month? I ask that because oftentimes I come across people who believe that their annual maintenance that they pay for their extinguishers, that covers the monthly inspection that is due every month. So that's partially correct. To begin with, every year your extinguishers need to be maintained. That gets done by a certified and licensed professional who does that, and what they do is they basically take a look inside, take a look at the integrity of the bottle, make sure everything works how it's supposed to work. It's a maintenance appointment. With the maintenance appointment, of course, comes a visual appointment, which happens as part of the service. The monthly requirement that I'm talking about, that monthly visual requirement, needs to happen separate from that. When you get your maintenance on your extinguishers, yes, you get your maintenance and you get a visual inspection. However, all the other 11 months where your extinguisher does not get maintained, it needs to be visually inspected, and it falls on the owner to make sure that that gets done. The reason for that is to make sure that the extinguisher, 1, exists, 2, is the one that you actually need, 3, is available and it's not damaged, and of course it's where it needs to be. So, and there's a whole thing on it. We also do fire extinguisher classes, but that's a different class. Point there is, certain things need to be done monthly, and if it's a monthly emergency action plan review, again, that's totally up to you. As long as you have it and your staff know how to use it and how to react, that is where you would save your money, because it would enable the mitigation of these emergencies. Last but not least is the grease removal in itself. As we know, vent hoods capture the grease, and vent hoods could also be the cause, or not the cause, they could contribute more to a fire because of the grease that gets accumulated in the ductwork, in the fan, and on the roof. You can save money here by finding certified kitchen exhaust cleaners that do the job right, in full, and in accordance with the standard. Oftentimes, this is one of the ways that a lot of restaurant owners like to save money, because they find the cheapest option, but they don't know that the cheapest option usually doesn't do the job in full, which means they leave grease in the system, in the ductwork, and of course you don't see it because it's literally behind and up in the roof or in the ceiling space. But if you were to require and ask for your before and after pictures, just how the standard states, then that's where you verify that the whole system was cleaned. That's important because, again, that grease is what fuels the fire. Additionally, your appliances also get dirty and get caked with grease. Of course, the backsplash, fryers, for example, they capture a lot of that grease and food stuff, all of which is prime ground for fires. Getting that cleaned periodically, professionally, or even if your staff did it and just did a scrub, a thorough scrub, that could also help minimize your fires, or just the fact that there won't be a fire, at least in that area, because of the grease. Certain companies like Fight Kitchen Fires do offer a package deal where they would take care of the grease in the vent hood and then the grease in the appliance in the kitchen area. So look for those and ask the questions, because you could actually be saving money in those bundles and also making sure that you're getting the full system cleaned properly and up to standard. When I was talking about different classifications of fire extinguishers, this is what I was talking about. Each letter is a different classification or different class. Each color pertains to that letter, and each shape also pertains to the letter and the color. As you can see, there are different classes. This is the stuff that you learn in your fire extinguisher class. I do have a class out there as well that I could teach you if needed. But this is the stuff that you need to know. Some extinguishers are ABC extinguishers. So it's a multi-use. And that's a good one because you get to save some money. You could use it in 3 different classes of fire. And you just need to be aware that it's A, B, and C. Some extinguishers, though, are only one of these classifications. So for example, a class A extinguisher is only for combustible materials, so ordinary combustibles. Basically, there's only water in there. You need to know that you cannot use that extinguisher on your class D fires, or of course your class C fires, and definitely not your class B or C, because you're going to make it worse. That's the importance of knowing the classifications. Of course, by knowing the classification, you could then use the extinguisher properly. This is where the pass comes in, if you've heard of it. Pull, aim, squeeze, sweep. Again, this is what we cover in the fire extinguisher class, as well as the visual inspections and their placement. So far, we've talked about classification of fires, fire extinguishers, fire extinguisher use, the cost of it, the actual monetary cost, approximately, and now we talk about closure. Not closure as in like you feel good and complete, but rather your restaurant's closed because of this fire. As I was putting this presentation together, I was looking around Texas for the different restaurant fires that have happened. I found different time frames as far as how long it took them to reopen. And here we could see some, of course, 3 weeks, 18 weeks, 2 years. It doesn't matter what type of fire it was. It doesn't matter where it was, what type of business it was. The point is, the fires that will happen, as we saw, these fires can be devastating and they could close you down for a long time. If your staff don't know how to use fire extinguishers, if your staff don't know how to react, if you don't have an emergency action plan, because accidents will happen. Sometimes you can't fight these fires, you just have to evacuate. If you don't have an emergency action plan to activate, then the loss can be even greater. Imagine being closed for 18 weeks and you didn't have a plan for the food or to evacuate or anything else that could have been pre-planned. By pre-planning, by having the classes on extinguishers, by having everything in place and training on it, you could definitely minimize the impact, the monetary impact that you're going to have when these fires happen. Here's an example of how your restaurant would be closed after a fire, but then the economy actually working against you because of the prices of everything going up. Here in San Antonio, just a couple months ago, in October of last year, these business owners were trying to recover from a fire, and this news report states that basically everything is working against them. The prices of construction, the prices of different items. So even though you may be recovering, or you may think, oh, it's easy to recover from a small fire. I saw 3 weeks there. My buddy did it in 2 days. Not every fire is the same. Not every situation is the same. And if you get caught in a specific time period, like let's say even COVID, right, which we weren't expecting, then it could definitely affect you. So that's the importance, again, of these emergency action plans and the different interventions like training on fire extinguishers so that you can minimize the impact of these fires and it doesn't hurt your wallet. Right now, in this example, not only do they not have employees, one can assume that they don't have employees. They're, of course, closed, and they've been closed. How much money is that? This brings us to a close. Today we talked about the high turnover and the fact that because of high turnover and shortage of staffing, you get a lot of new people who may not necessarily be trained. And because of it, some of your personnel that have been there for a while must pick up the slack, and they themselves perhaps are not being trained or don't have the mental capacity because they're busy physically doing the job that someone else should be doing or is learning how to do it. We saw what water does to a grease fire and how a simple small fire actually turned into something bigger and more catastrophic. We saw numbers. We saw that Friday through Sunday we have our profit margin. That's exactly when it happens, but at the same time, it's exactly those days when we have fires. We went over solutions. We went over 5 of them, mostly training, and we also went through PASS, which was how to use a fire extinguisher. You basically got a little fire extinguisher class there. And here we are. I want to thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, if you want to reach out to us, please contact us. Here's the email. You can check us out on YouTube. I try and post videos at least once a month. And check out our website in case you need anything like an evacuation plan or fire extinguisher training, or even your vent hoods if you need them cleaned by a professional and certified company. Once again, my name is Jonathan Campos, and thank you. Have a good day.